Hi, you're listening to Childless and Moving Onward. This is the place where we talk about thriving in life when you're a woman who is childless, not by choice, regardless of the road that brought you to childlessness. Hi, and welcome to episode 76 of Childless and Moving Onward. Sorry, it's a little bit late this week because of technical difficulties, but we're back with you. And for those who don't know me, I'm Gail Miller, your host. I'm a physician, life coach, and speaker. I also am childless not by choice, but it is part of who I am. It's not the whole picture. It's not the sum of my identity. I share it intentionally, but not as the headline because, like so many of you, I am more than this loss that I carry. That said, there are still moments, sometimes more than moments, longer than moments, times when the grief catches me off guard, when the memories sting, and when the deep ache shows up and it's uninvited. I created this podcast to hold space for those experiences, to hold space for honesty about what it really feels like and the depth of this pain, but also at the same time, shining a light on what is possible beyond the pain and grief. Each week, my goal is to walk alongside you in unraveling the tension between pain and possibility. But yes, the heartache is still there. Like when we see women who seem to dismiss or even neglect the very role that we long for, it can stir up that haunting question, why them and not me? Today, I want to spend some time with that thought because it's one so many of us carry silently, and it deserves to be spoken out loud. Now, it's not uncommon to see events in our wider community or even beyond that and feel the immense pain and wonder that, why not me, when we read and hear about women who abuse or neglect their children. Women who are strangers to us personally, but we hear about it in the news or social media. The pain we feel for the children affected and the pain we feel in the why them and not me thoughts can be unbearable. But what happens when it's not some stranger who we only know through public media? What happens when it's someone we know firsthand, and maybe it's someone even within our family? And that's what I want to talk about this week. I know many of you are affected by this. What happens for you when it's a personal connection? For me, it feels so different, far worse than the unknown person on the news. It's difficult to explain, but this came up for me recently on a very personal level when I was faced with this painful reality for a few different people. It wasn't the first time it happened, but it all came to light about 3 people, all in a very short time frame. So the ache was especially deep and jarring. All at once learning about a relative who abused and neglected their child, who that child is now a grown adult and a wonderful parent, but who went through some sickening situations from mom. The only thing that surprised me about this situation was that this relative of mine would do this to her own child. Her actions alone, unfortunately, weren't surprising because I had been on the receiving end of her atrocious behavior as a child. And her emotional abuse continued on into my adult life. So the stories, which were so similar to what I experienced, were all too believable to me. I just didn't think she was capable of this when it came to her own kids. But sadly and maddeningly, she is. Then around the same time, there were two other women who we personally know, who it turns out were, well, I'll say it this way. They were very neglectful, never doing anything with their kids, left them for others to raise, and on and on. And all of this, again, came to light within a few days of each other, with the information about my relative capping it all off. And just, it really did me in. I felt gutted. It left me with that question, why them and not me? And I was playing it over and over in my head, wondering how abusive and neglectful moms become moms, while so many of us who would be caring and nurturing as moms, and we're left with an empty place in our hearts, yearning to have the opportunity that they had, and frankly, in my opinion, blew. It left me wondering about fate. Was this my fate because I would have been even worse than these women were as moms? So if you've ever found yourself spiraling down that rabbit hole of thoughts and questions, why did life hand motherhood to women who essentially throw it away or neglect it? But those of us who would have poured everything into it were left standing empty-handed and brokenhearted. You're not alone if this has come across your mind. It's such a painfully human reaction, and it cuts deep, to say the least. Now, first, I want to take a moment to acknowledge just how much courage it takes to admit these feelings, even to yourself. There's an expectation in our culture that we should always be positive, be grateful for what we have, and somehow be above the raw, messy parts, especially as women. But the truth is, it's so natural, it's human to feel angry, to have feelings of bitterness and resentment when we witness injustices like this, especially when those injustices bump up against our own deepest longings. For some, those who look at this from a religious or spiritual standpoint or viewpoint, it can bring up feelings of unworthiness through that lens. And even if you're not looking at it through that lens of spirituality or being religious, it brings up those feelings of unworthiness. But we can feel so guilty about thinking these things. So once more, give yourself credit for the bravery it takes to admit these feelings that society would tell us are wrong. And maybe, like me, you sometimes judge yourself for those feelings. You catch that flash of envy or bitterness and think, what's wrong with me? I should be better than this. But I want to assure you that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. These are honest, human, valid emotions. When someone else has what you ache for and doesn't seem to treasure it, of course that wounds you even more than what you're already navigating. Sometimes the pain can feel heavier when it comes from within our own personal circles, family, friends, acquaintances, colleagues. the closer to home that it hits, the more it can shake your trust in the fairness of things or in your ability to ever make sense of life. Now, what I've noticed, both in my own story and in those of my clients, is that when we have these why them and not me moments, so many layers of pain and injustice can well up all at once. There's the grief over what we won't have, but also this sense of powerlessness, or it's a total lack of control in our lives. A feeling at our core that life, fate, or the universe just got it so wrong. There's the wondering of why life is so unfair, and did fate mix us up with someone else and think we deserve this pain? And then there's guilt layered in for even having these thoughts at all. So how do we navigate these emotions, especially when they flare up intensely and usually unexpectedly? I'm certainly not a stranger to these feelings. I know from speaking with so many of you that this is usually a silent sorrow, as if it's deemed inappropriate to admit. But I believe naming it together can help loosen the grip of the shame that comes with it. Maybe you've tried to at least yourself out of the pain, telling yourself that at least you have X, Y, and Z in your life. You know, the default, just look at the positives. So, fill in the blank of the X, Y, and Z after the at least I have those things in my life. You've told yourself you have a good life, that you contribute to others, that maybe being a mom isn't all that you've imagined it to be. And sometimes maybe that helps until it doesn't. Sometimes logic and perspective just don't touch the ache, and that's okay. What helps me the most and might help you is allowing the full truth of these feelings. I try to let myself sit with them without judgment. On certain days, that means letting the tears for what might have been flow freely. Or maybe it's giving myself space to allow the anger in me, to let myself feel it and express it. Other days, it means reaching out to someone supportive, maybe a friend, family member, religious leader, or a safe support group, and sharing things like, I'm having one of those days where life feels especially unfair. Sometimes what helps me is finding a sense of peace in ritual. For me, ritual is comforting, though I know for many that it's uncomfortable to view it that way because you may feel best with spontaneity. But things like writing out my feelings or lighting a candle for the children I never had can be done spontaneously when the need arises. Whether or not you're into rituals, little acts of acknowledgement can sometimes help shift the burden, even just a little. Another thing I want to mention is compassion. And I'm going to describe it in a way that society would say is selfish, but I refuse to see it that way. Compassion for yourself is the first priority. I mean, really, after all, what good are you for others if you're not taking care of yourself, or if you're not good in a good space? What good are you for yourself if you're not taking care of yourself? So start with compassion for yourself. That is key. Your pain is valid. Your anger is valid. None of this makes you unkind or bitter or unworthy. It simply makes you human. And if you can, try to set a limit with the people you see who bring up these feelings. It's okay to mute a social feed for a while or limit how much contact you have with some people. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. It's a necessity. You matter. So as we reach the end of this discussion today, I want to remind you there is no right way to feel in the face of this unfairness. You get to define what healing and meaning look like for you. Remember that being childless is a chapter in your story, but it is never the whole story, and it does not have to define you. And even when the ache resurfaces and slaps you in the face full force, even more so than the daily ongoing pain, you can carry it and move onward one step, one day at a time. And if today's episode brought up a lot for you, please reach out, whether to a trusted friend, therapist, or to join my free support group. You are not alone in this. And thank you for letting me share a part of my heart and experience with you today. If this resonated, I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, your stories, or even just a message saying, me too. We really are in this together. Until next week, take gentle, compassionate care of yourself. I'm so glad you joined me. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you liked it, you can find more tips, insight, and support in a private space with other women who are like you, so they get you. You can do that by joining my free Facebook group, When Being Childless Isn't by Choice. Join us by clicking on the link in the show notes. You can also stay up to date with me on Instagram at Childless Path Onward and Facebook and YouTube at Path Onward. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.